Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Forged by Trust podcast. My name is Robin Dreeke. I'm the former head of the FBI Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program, as well as an internationally recognized trust expert, author, speaker, and your host. Before we get going today, let me remind you to please like the podcast, leave a review, and help us keep the lights on by giving yourself the greatest gift. And that is the first step of forging trust, which is building quick rapport. So go ahead, buy my online book, which is It's Not All About Me, the 10 Techniques to Quick Rapport with Anyone. Also, soon to be an Audible book. Do that for yourself and you will be well on your way to forging your own trust. On today's episode, I'm extremely excited to be introducing you to Bob Burg. I was introduced to Bob Burg's work as the Go-Giver a number of months ago from another friend of mine, and his book is transformative. It's sold millions of copies internationally. Anyway, so for over 30 years, Bob Burg has been successfully showing entrepreneurs, leaders, and sales professionals how to communicate their value and accelerate their referral business. Although for years he is best known for his sales classic Endless Referrals, it's his business parable, The Go-Giver, co-authored with John David Mann, that has created a worldwide movement. While part of a 4-book series, The Go-Giver itself has sold more than 1 million copies and been translated into 30 languages. It was rated number 10 on Inc. magazine's list of the most motivational books ever written and was on HubSpot's 20 most highly rated sales books of all time. Bob is an advocate, supporter, and defender of the free enterprise system, believing that the amount of money one makes is directly proportional to how many people they serve. He's also an unapologetic animal fanatic and served on the board of directors of Furry Friends Adoption and Clinic in his town of Jupiter, Florida. And I gotta tell you, Bob walks the walk and talks the talk. When I reached out to Bob to be on our show, he immediately responded. He is giving and he brings immense value everywhere he goes. So as always, take out your pen and paper, sit back, relax, and listen into this impactful, dense episode of great strategic takeaways for exceptional and stratospheric success.
Hi.
And there he is.
How are you, Robin?
Bob, I am fantastic. I can't even begin to tell you how humbled I am. I can't imagine your schedule to spend a little bit of time with me and our audience.
It's my absolute pleasure.
Oh, and besides that, I'm now enamored with the books behind you.
I always say my home is comprised of books with some scattered furniture.
Yeah, mine's quickly turning into the same, and your book being the forefront of it. Matter of fact, I just read The Go-Giver Leader on a short vacation I had as well. So thank you for all you do in all these arenas.
Oh, and that's so very nice.
Your whole team is so wonderful. And first of all, I want to thank you for responding to be as widely popular as you are with your book and all you do, to be able to take a few minutes and share with our audience. It's humbling and inspiring to watch someone share and practice what they preach. And part of that is your Go-Giver community that I recently joined, and I'm loving it. Matter of fact, I was on a podcast last night in a show, and I mentioned it there because people are kind of struggling or trying to come up with ideas about forming communities. And I said, I just joined this amazing community of the Go-Giver community. Oh. And not just the community itself, but the fact that how involved you are with it, which again, exemplifies you and your message that you put out there. So really, to kick us off, the show is the laws of stratospheric success. What are those 5 laws from your book that you could give us a quick summary of?
Oh, we're on now. I didn't realize we were actually.
Oh, we're on, Bob. I'm recording everything. So when you got 30 minutes with a rock star, I make every minute count.
Okay. I didn't even know we were on. So, okay. So the 5 laws of stratospheric success, which is what John David Mann, my awesome co-author of The Go-Giver, what we call the 5 principles that we share in the story, which is a business parable. So before I share what they are first, just as background, the 5 laws are based on a premise. Okay. And that is that shifting your focus, and this is really where it all begins, shifting your focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others. So, and that doing so is not only a more pleasant way of conducting business, a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it's actually the most financially profitable way as well. And not for any kind of woo-woo, way out there, magical, mystical type of reasons, but for very logical, very rational reasons. And that is when you're that person who can take your focus off of yourself and place it on serving others, discovering what they need, what they want, what they desire, moving off of yourself and focusing on helping others solve their challenges and problems, taking the focus off yourself and making it all about helping other people move closer to happiness. When you do that, people feel good about you. People want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be involved in your life. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. Or if they work in your organization, they're much more likely to follow you, and they want to tell others about you. So that's really what this is about. And the 5 laws, which are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity, are all about taking that basic premise and bringing it to fruition through those actions.
I love having folks like you on that really understand this basic core principle of making it about others. It's out of the 3 leadership pillars I have, the last one is being an available resource for the success and prosperity of others. And the key is without expectation or reciprocity. You give without that expectation. Because if you go in a relationship with an expectation, well, then really, is it about them or is it about you? Right. So I love this premise of, and also, especially in today's world of dealing with pandemics and challenges everywhere, where I really have seen people challenged with a lot of mental health issues as well, where they're feeling down, they're getting depressed. The greatest thing you can do to boost yourself is be of service to others. Right. It is, whenever I'm having a bad day, the first thing I do, literally before anything, is I remind myself to be a go-giver and be of service. Because the second you become of service, all the brain chemistry starts just firing, because that's such a good thing for us to do psychologically. And when we are feeling that psychological safety, we can really start innovating and creating our way to solving problems. So, right on. And I looked at, you have a lot of great questions that we could cover, but I love backstories, because I think having context where someone comes from, because it's never what anyone imagines. You always see the end state. For me, people say, how'd you get to be the behavioral analysis program guy for the FBI? Well, easy. I failed at everything else. So there's a backstory, and it's the same thing with you. I know there's a fascinating backstory. So Bob, how did you discover the need to be a go-giver?
Well, so I started out in broadcasting. I was a radio sportscaster and then a television news anchor for a very, very small ABC network affiliate in the Midwestern United States. But I really wasn't very good at that. And it wasn't long before I kind of knew that wasn't going to be my livelihood. So I like to say I graduated into sales. The challenge is that I knew nothing about sales on any kind of formal level. I had never taken I didn't even know there was such a thing as sales training. And apparently the company I was working for didn't either, because it did not exist. So I was kind of out on my own trying to make my way. And I floundered for the first few months. I mean, I was going nowhere. I had the motivation, but as Jim Rohn would say, I had the motivation, but not the information, right? So I was basically doing a whole lot of nothing. Now, if you have the information, it's also important to have the motivation. But right now, I needed to get the information. The problem was I had no idea how. Now, again, this is 40 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. The sales teaching and training and books and videos and all these things are everywhere now. 40 years ago, that really wasn't the case. So I was in a bookstore one day and just looking for something when I came across the sales section, which again, I didn't even know such a thing existed. And I saw 2 books on sales. One was by Zig Ziglar. One was by Tom Hopkins, 2 of the icons, of course, in the sales space. And immediately I was encouraged because there's actually a way to sell. It's not just knocking on doors, going in there, talking about my product and service and why they should buy it. I mean, really, I had no idea. And so I got their books, and I like to say I did not read them. I devoured them. And so I would come home every night after work, and I would just read and study and practice and highlight and underline and take notes and practice more, and the whole thing. Well, within about 3 weeks, Robin, my sales began to go through the roof. And there was really nothing significantly different about me 3 weeks since I'd bought the books, other than I now had a methodology.
Mm-hmm.
I had a system, if you will. And I personally define a system as the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles. The key being predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired result of B, then all you need to do is A and continue to do A and continue to do A, and eventually you'll get the desired results of B. Well, that was, that to me was huge. The really cool thing about it, though, was as I began to realize that sales was not just about learning the materials, it was about personal development itself. So now I started buying all the books that we hear about, that the How to Win Friends and Influence People, and the Think and Grow Rich, and Psycho-Cybernetics, and As a Man Thinketh, and all the books that we probably all have on our bookshelves. And what I came to realize was that success begins on the inside, right? We have to build ourselves on the inside. It manifests itself on the outside. But I think really the experience that got me set along the go-giver way, if you will, is something that happened about 2 years after I started in sales. And again, at that point, I started to do really, really well after a few months, and I'd gotten those books. But after a couple of years, I went to another company and was selling a rather high-ticket item, and I found myself in a slump. And sales slumps are very scary, right? Because you don't see how you're going to get out of it. And I made a very young salesperson's mistake. And that is the more I tried to get out of the slump, the more my focus became on me, as opposed to those I needed to be serving. So the more focus was on me, the less people wanted to buy, and the more of a slump I was in, and the more pressure. Well, one day I went back to the office after, a non-selling appointment, right? And it was supposed to be a selling appointment, but it was a non-selling appointment. And I must have looked pretty dejected, because one of the guys there, he was an older guy. He was not in the sales department. I think he was an engineer or something. Really nice guy. The type of guy, he didn't say much, but whenever he did say something, it tended to be pretty profound. And I think he may have seen me as Joe, the character in The Go-Giver, who I would write about with John David Mann about 20 years after that, or whatever it was. And as that, he saw me as that young, ambitious, up and coming, aggressive, right? But very off track salesperson who had a lot of potential, but was not nearly living up to it. And he said, "Burg, can I give you some advice?" And I said, "Yeah, please do. I need it." And he said, "If you want to make a lot of money in sales," he said, "don't have making money as your target. Your target is serving others. Now, when you hit the target," he continued, "you'll get a reward. And that reward will come in the form of money. Right. And you can do with that money whatever you choose. But never forget," he said, "the money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It isn't the target itself. Your target is serving others." And what that said to me, Robin, was that great salesmanship is never about the salesperson. Great salesmanship is never about the product or service, as important as those are. That's not what it's about. Great salesmanship is about the other person. It's about that person whose life you're trying to add value to. Really, when you think about it, it's about another person's life being better just because you are part of it. And I think that when we approach sales from that foundational premise, I think then we're 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game.
Absolutely. And the beauty of that is with that other focus, it's the same thing. It's leadership. It's everything, because leaders, great leaders, exemplary leaders are servant leaders, which are there to serve and be a resource for the success of others. And you mentioned another thing too, though, which I think is really critical, because since it's the Forged by Trust podcast, you mentioned consistency. One of the greatest things that creates trust, one in ourselves, because we need to have trust in ourselves, which overcomes our insecurities, which get in our way many times, which becomes that manifested ego, which makes it about self, is consistency.
Sure.
Understanding and having a process and a program in place. As for me, things I've written there, I call my books my manuals on how not to be the self-centered narcissist I was born to be. They're my rules for getting outside of myself. Even right now, I have my show notes next to me. The number one thing under Bob Burg is make it about him, less I statements, because you got to keep that focus outward to make it about others, bring that value. And so it's the consistency of your own process for yourself, but also demonstrating to others that consistency as well. I just had another guest on, Abby Morano, who's a nonverbal expert on trust. And trust is really defined really simply as consistency, because that creates an understanding of safety. When people feel safe, when they feel comfortable, and you provide that psychological comfort, which you do so well with that focus on others, that's when shields come down, and that when relationships really get forged. I'm curious. So you obviously were doing some things right back then, and you were doing a few things probably off. What was the first thing you noticed? Because this obviously takes a high level of self-awareness to begin this journey of humility and owning that, all right, I'm doing something off. What was the first thing you noticed that was off that you really needed to start righting your ship with?
Well, once I sort of course corrected after that gentleman's advice and started doing really well in sales again, okay, and that my sales went to a whole new level, I was then promoted to sales manager, which really is sales leader, okay? And I came to realize something. I was not a good leader. I was a good producer.
Right.
I was not a good leader. And I mean, I was terrible. And so I had to, once I realized again that leadership is actually a thing I can learn, which is good because I know nothing about it. I thought I did, but then I could start to study that and begin to improve. But that was something that really hit me that I just didn't expect. And to know that, there's a big difference, but you can be a producer, but not necessarily a leader. And that was my case entirely.
Yeah, fascinating. It's I think everyone can relate to that. I've experienced that, where you think that the way to advance your own career is to make yourself look good, to produce. For in the FBI, it's make cases, recruit spies, or whatever, which becomes almost self-centered, me focused. But then when you go up to leadership and you have to inspire others to do the same, you have to really add even more of an element of focusing on others. So out of those 5 traits, what do you think is the most challenging for people to imbue on a first pass? If someone is struggling either in leadership or sales or any aspect of their lives, because that's what I think the Go-Giver is really good at. It's a parable for how to live life really healthy and productively. What do you think is the greatest stumbling block people have?
Well, I think there's 2 of them. One is understanding that it isn't about you. And I know that sounds so basic and elementary, especially in light of what we're talking about. But the reason why this is so difficult to grasp is because it's human nature to be self-interested.
Right.
As human beings, we are self-interested. It was wired into us from the time of our cave person ancestors who, their biggest thing was surviving the day. Right. So self-interest was a big thing. Now, the ones who worked together and played well with others actually did survive better, but it's still very natural, self-interest too. And that's why one of the things I suggest to people is don't think you have to forego your self-interest. Okay. And this will confuse people at first when they hear that. But the reason I say that is because as human beings, we are naturally self-interested. Okay. So to try to forego something that we're not ready to forego is just going to kind of mess us up. So I say, don't deny your self-interest. Don't forego your self-interest. What I want you to do is to practice temporarily suspending your self-interest. Put it to the side. Look at it for practical purposes, not just because you're being nice. Okay. Look at how you're placing your interests to the side to place other interests first, how that's actually going to be in your best interest. How? Let's look at a few things. One, Dale Carnegie in his classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People, I think summarized it best. In fact, I think this was the underlying premise of his entire book. And that's where he said, ultimately, people do things for their reasons,
right?
Not our reasons. Okay. So I often, when I speak at a sales conference, I'll say, nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet, right? They're not going to buy from you because you need the money or because you'd like the sale to happen. They're not even going to buy from you just because you're a really nice human being. They're going to buy from you because they believe that they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And when you think about it, that's the only reason why anyone should buy from you or from me or from anyone else. Remember, they're self-interested, right?
Yep.
Now, this is good news, though, for that salesperson who can truly place that other person's interest first. Because if that's what you're doing, then you're meeting them on their land, right? You're looking for how what is selling? Selling is simply discovering what the other person needs, wants, and desires and helping them to get it. So you've got to make the focus on them. Now, as a leader, people aren't going to follow you for your reasons. They're going to follow you for their reasons. That's why the great influencer, the great leaders, the great influencers, why they don't push, right? They don't push themselves. They don't push their will. They don't push their ideas on others. Instead of pushing, what they do is they pull, right? You never hear someone say, wow, that David or that Nancy, she is so influential. She has a lot of push with people. No, they'd say she's influential. She has a lot of pull with people. That's what influence is. It's pull. It's an attraction. Great influencers, great leaders attract people first to themselves and then to their ideas. Now, how do they do that? Right? Well, they ask themselves questions to make sure their focus is in the correct place. Right? Now, I think we need to be internally motivated, but outwardly or other focused. So the great influencers always asking themselves, how does what I'm asking this other person to do, how does it align with their goals, with their needs, wants, and desires? How does what I want this other person to do, how does it align with their values? What problems am I helping them to overcome? How am I helping to tie into their personal, right? And so when we ask ourselves these questions thoughtfully, intelligently, genuinely, authentically, not as a way to manipulate another human being into doing our will, absolutely not, but as a way of building everyone in the process, now we've come a lot closer to earning that person's commitment to our ideas. Commitment is a result of pull, whereas compliance is a result of push. And as you know, compliance is only going to take you so far. One of my great friends, leadership speaker, Dondi Scumaci, says, when it comes to leadership and influence, compliance will never take you where commitment can go.
Yeah, just relating that to my own life and experiences, I always used to say I'd rather have 7 confidential human sources cooperating in the FBI giving me 120% of their effort willingly than 100 people give me 5% reluctantly. This is why I love the congruence of your message and what you do, because it's going to the credo that we've shared numerous times on this show and everything. And that is, you can always guarantee that all human beings are always going to act in their own best interest in terms of their safety, security, prosperity for themselves and those they care about, which is their best interest, their priorities, their pain points, and their motivations, their challenges. All your job is to figure out what those are and provide resources for those things. People say, well, how do you recruit a spy? You must use manipulation and subterfuge. I said, are you nuts? No, it's discovering which one of these intelligence officers have priorities, like they don't want their kids growing up under Putin. They want a better education system. They want better healthcare for the elderly parents. Mm-hmm. My job is to figure out which one of those has those kind of priorities. I have resources, and I'm now going to share my priorities with them and see if they want to have an exchange of resources. The other thing, and we even said it in the community the other day, which I really loved when you're talking about persuasion and the difference between the push and the pull. I love using words to really make that poignant, and is that pushing people think in terms of trying to convince someone. Pulling people think in terms of how to inspire them or persuade them. Exactly. And so you can never convince anyone of anything. All you can do is inspire them to want to listen, inspire them to want to do something, because inspiration has to come from within them. So with all that, I think some of the challenges that it's so easy to know we're going to do these things, want to do these things, make it about everyone else. At what point do you say it's too much, or you stop making, like you hit that point when you stop making money? Or what do you do if you think you're doing all these things and being a great go-giver, but it's not working? You're not making money. Does that happen? If it does happen, like, what's your barrier of assessment, I guess?
Well, if you're doing it correctly, you've got to be doing well. So because, again, these 5 laws are not things that John and I made up. These 5 laws or principles have been around since time immemorial. We've named them certain things and told it in story form. But no, these are based on the principles that successful people have utilized forever. Now, many of them did it intuitively, right? They didn't even know they were doing these things.
They're artists. They're artists.
Yeah, but if you really look and you read their biographies and you study them, you find out this is exactly what they did. And all 5 of those laws that we mentioned earlier, value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity, they had to plug into each one of those. The challenge is, let's say with something like value, okay, and the law of value is all about the value, the based experience you're providing another person, so that when they end up, let's say, buying from you eventually, right, and it could be today, next week, next month, whatever, okay, the experience they're receiving is totally more than the price they're paying,
right?
Okay, so, but that kind of sounds a little counterintuitive when you think about it. How do you give more in value than what you take in payment and not go bankrupt, right?
Right.
So we have to understand the difference between price and value. Price is a dollar figure. Value is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, what have you, that brings so much worth to another person that they will willingly exchange their money for it and be glad they did, while you make a very healthy profit? Very quick example would be the accountant who charges you $1,000 to do your taxes, but she saves you $5,000. The $1,000 is her fee or price, but she saves you $5,000. Saves you countless hours of time, provides you and your family with the security and the peace of mind of knowing it was done correctly. She actually gave you well over $5,000 in value in exchange for $1,000 price. So you feel great about it. And she also made a very healthy profit, which she should. In any free market-based exchange, and when I say free market, I simply mean no one is forced to do business with anyone else, okay? In any free market-based exchange, there should always be 2 profits, the buyer profits and the seller profits, because each of them come away much better off afterwards than they were beforehand, okay? So it's always up to the seller, though, to be able to communicate that value, right? And so a lot of times when someone says, "Oh, but I'm a go-giver, I'm giving value to," well, that's value as you might think it's value.
There's the key.
But that doesn't mean the marketplace thinks it's of value. That doesn't mean that particular person finds it to be of value. Okay. Yep. So, that tends to be if I'm doing any kind of, check with someone as far as what they're not doing, a lot of times it has to do with they're really not they're providing value in a way they think the other person should think it's of value, but not is. And another thing people have trouble with is receptivity, which is the fifth law. And, that says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. But because the world fills us with so many horrible anti-prosperity messages from the time we're very, very young, right? And we see it all the time. Well, that gets into people's subconscious, into their unconscious minds. And they end up pushing away and sabotaging the prosperity that they've so rightly earned, right? And if they're not aware of this, and as you know, awareness is always the first step toward fixing or overcoming an issue, right? But when it's unconscious, that's what's so insidious about it. People don't even realize that they're pushing away their own prosperity. So, so these are things, of course, we cover, but I think it takes additional study. I think we never stop learning. We always want to continue to read books and go to seminars and watch the videos on YouTube and do the things that are going to help us to improve ourselves in these areas.
Always be a teacher and always be a learner.
Exactly.
Bob, it's been a quick time together, extremely insightful, extremely valuable. I can't thank you enough. I know my audience has taken an immense amount away from it, probably watch it numerous times like I know I will go back. Any one last thought or really bit of advice you can give people before we sign off?
I think the really big thing is to know what it is that you want and continue trying to discover that. What is that desire? What is it that really drives you? And then, of course, you've got, aside from just loving what you do and being great at it, you've got to be able to find a marketplace that you can serve with it. And at that point, find out how to do it. Someone already has, so learn their system, right? That process of predictably, right? Take action now, start doing it, be a go-getter, a person of action, as well as a go-giver, that person who is absolutely, totally focused on others. Just don't be a go-taker.
I love it.
And then stay persistent, be persistent, and know that no is unfortunately one of those real big ingredients on the way to yes. And
it is.
And as long as we understand that, we're okay.
And as you enumerate in your book, and it's actually part of the whole parable, teachers, mentors, and guides are great people to help us show us that path, but you have to have the humility to be open to it. So
what a great point.
Bob, thank you so much for spending the time today. And thank you for inviting me into your community. And I hope everyone else will take a look at it and join as well. And everyone, that is it for today's episode of Forged by Trust. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Forged by Trust. If you enjoyed the show, took away a few new tools, I hope you will leave a great review of the show to show your support. If you are interested in more information about how to forge your own trust building strategies, please visit my website at www.peopleformula.com. You can also follow me on my social media sites included in the show notes. I'm looking forward to sharing my next Forged by Trust episode with you soon.